All right, I'm excited for this new entry into our alumni spotlights. I have the pleasure of interviewing Morgan Comrie. Morgan, if you could please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Morgan Comrie. I was Morgan Henry when I was in the department. I recently got married. I graduated in May of 2019 with a BS in computer science and a minor in math.
So where are you originally from, Morgan?
I'm from Northern California, a small town called Chico. It's like north of the Bay Area. Most people haven't heard of it.
Yeah, so that place does have some nice weather, different weather than here for sure. So what made
Yeah.
you decide to attend the University of Arizona?
As I was looking for schools, California is very expensive. Um, I applied to a lot of California schools, and since I lived in the state and I had, the certain scores and whatnot, I was guaranteed a spot at one of the schools. I don't even remember which one I got into, but I wasn't thrilled about it. And I got a advertisement in the mail about U of A, and my dad actually got his PhD at U of A in computer science. So I was like, huh, well, I guess I could maybe go there. So I convinced my parents to do a trip over spring break. We drove, I think it was like a 16-hour drive from Northern California down to Arizona. And funny enough, my babysitter, like from when I was a kid, went to U of A as well. And she was an alum living in the area. So she gave me a tour of the school, talked all about her time there. And I was sold. I was like, this is it. This is where I want to be. I love the sun. I hate the cold. And I was like, this is it. So it felt, when you're deciding to go to college, it just feels like so stressful. Which decision is right, which isn't. And my mom kept telling me, she's like, you'll know. It'll come and you'll know. And I knew. So that's how I ended up at UA.
So you have a family member who went to the U of A as well, it sounds like. So PhD in computer science, your father,
Yes.
which may have had an impact on your exposure to computer science, the field in which you pursue. Why did you select computer science as your major?
Yeah. So my dad's a computer science professor back in my hometown. It's a college town, and I would always see him on his computer, and he was always typing in this black box. Always. He was just always typing everything. And of course, when I was a kid, using the computer is always like a mouse, right? Click. And I was like, what are you doing, Dad? He's like, I'm controlling the computer, is how it started when I was a kid, right? And as I progressed, I learned more and more. It's like, oh, you're typing things to make the computer do things. And then I learned that that just expanded more and more. And I got the opportunity in high school to do dual enrollment my senior year. So I got to take classes at the community college. And I was like, you know what? Let's give this thing a try. So I took the first CS course, which was actually taught by a guy who was my dad's former student. So being Tyson's daughter started pretty early on there. Um, and I loved it. I thought it was so much fun. I was like really excited to do the projects. I also had to take English and stuff. And I would like get that out of the way so I could get to do my programming assignments. And it wasn't all that surprising, but before I kind of fell into computer science, I was considering going into math. I was like, I want to be a math teacher. But math and computer science have a lot of similarities. So it wasn't really all that surprising. And I feel very lucky that I knew what I wanted to do. I got into it. I liked it. I was good at it. I think it's very rare for people to come into college and not change their major, especially with a field like computer science. There's becoming more, but there's not a lot of exposure to it. I had like no exposure to it. I only got to do it because of this dual enrollment program. So, everyone else has no idea what this kind of thing is. And so I feel very fortunate, but I still love it. Still love what I do. So I'm very, very lucky that it's worked out for me.
That's wonderful to hear. And it is rare for a student to, like you said, jump in and have that focus to be able to just continue with that major. So that's wonderful that it worked out for you and that you still love it. When you were here at the University of Arizona, you must have had lots of experiences. What is one of your most enjoyable experiences while at the University of Arizona Computer Science Department?
Within the department, I got to be a tutor, and it was kind of one of those things. I applied to be a section leader, and I swore I was like, man, I went so well. I thought that interview went great, and then I didn't get it. I was so disappointed. And I was talking to your predecessor, Bridget. I was like, Bridget, I didn't get to be a section leader. She's like, well, we're opening a tutor center next semester. Why don't you come tutor? I was like, huh, all right, sure. And I started that my I was a bit ahead for my dual enrollment. So I started tutoring my second semester freshman year and did it all the way through my senior year. And my last year, I was tutor coordinator. And just everything that happened with that tutor center was, I mean, there were ups and downs, but it's something about the department I really loved. And I have a little bit more insight just into universities in general from my dad, but there are a lot of places who don't have the kind of resources that U of A provides their students, especially our CS department. So the fact that we were bringing something new, we were starting something new to provide more support on top of section leaders, on top of office hours, was really exciting. And I had a lot of great fun in that tutor room. I've really playing, we had quiet time playing tic-tac-toe down to these crazy bugs that no one could figure out because somebody wrote something deep in the depths of, function and function and function. So I have very, very fond memories. It was up in Gould Simpson. We moved rooms a couple times, but that ninth floor, I just have a lot of fond memories being there.
Yeah, the tutor center is definitely a well-used resource in the department. It's one that's looked upon fondly by students as a critical support. So I'm glad that you had a big impact on that, being the one of the first tutors in that department. That's wonderful. So you've been a tutor. You were here at the university. What are some of your favorite memories while being at the U of A?
I was also a resident assistant, so I lived in the dorms my freshman year, and then for 2 years after that, I was an RA, and that was like another big passion of mine. I have crazy memories. We had to stay up and do like 2 a.m. rounds, so we built a really great community, and something. I'm from a small town, and so when I heard that U of A was like barely U of A itself is like with the employees, the faculty, the students is like barely smaller than my hometown population. So it felt very intimidating to me. And I learned very quickly it doesn't have to be. You find your communities. And I had one in computer science and I had one in residence life. I was just telling the story the other day that I was the RA on duty. And they're freshmen, but they were always so fun to be around. Most of the time they were pretty innocent, but it's the first time they don't have parents around. And I walked into a study room one night and they had taped this girl to the wall with duct tape. And she had asked. So it's not like it was torture. She's like, no, no, it was my idea. I wanted it. I was like, as long as I don't come in here and see paint missing from the wall, I'm leaving. I'll be back in 2 hours. But I just love the fun and the camaraderie and the community that you can find at U of A, even though it's a big school.
That's great. And having that support network is always very helpful as well, to be connected in some way. It's great. Was there a faculty member that you felt connected to, maybe that had a positive impact on you when you were here?
Yeah, I don't think she's with the department anymore, but Dr. Michelle Strout. She started, I think, about the same time I came to the university. She was new. And of course, uh, there aren't that many women in our field. And so it's on your mind. I remember being in my first, I think I took like 127B, which I don't even think is a class anymore, but it's like the second class. And I remember it was in this huge room. I think it was probably modern languages or something. It was a big room. And I remember looking around and there were 3 women that first class. That can feel really isolating. And it's something you notice as a woman, but it's probably not, from my experience, not something the men even notice. It just it just is how it is. But Dr. Strout came and she implemented a couple things in the department that greatly benefited me. One was she called it Women in Computer Science Tea. So I was part of the WICS, which was great, but it was mostly undergrad students. It was great. We had a lot of fun. But this tea that Dr. Michelle Strout would host, I don't know, every month or every other month, included a lot of grad students and the other faculty who were women. It brought them together because, as an undergrad, there's some faculty you'll never meet because they're focused on research, they focus on grad classes. So there were some other professors that I had no idea were in the department, partially because I was new, but they don't teach, especially low level courses. And so that created a really fun community. We would talk about our field and talk about our, goals and aspirations. And sometimes we would talk about what we watched on TV or the U of A sports. And it was really fun to have that environment where now you're not the only woman here. There are others here. We're small, but we're mighty. We come together, we build that network. So that was really cool. And the other thing I believe she started was the sponsorship to go to Grace Hopper. So Grace Hopper, for those who don't know, is a big conference for women in computing. It still goes on. It was virtual for a couple of years because of COVID and this, that, and the other, but she started that. And I'm very fortunate I got to go twice. And that's where I got my job. So if it weren't for that, I wouldn't be here at GoDaddy. But on top of that, it's incredible to be an undergrad and get to go to those conferences and hear those talks. It's like, sometimes computer science, when you're in the degree, you're like, well, what am I going to do after? What does come next? And these conferences are incredible because, yes, there's a job fair, a lot of opportunities, a lot of networking, but you can also hear about how they apply to so many different aspects of life. I remember the talk I went to, my first Grace Hopper was talking about incarcerated women when they get out of prison. They have no idea how to use technology if they've been in prison for so long. And they were talking about how they created all these various software apps and websites to help them learn. That's not something we generally think about as an adult having to learn how to use the computer. We have a lot of learn how to use the computer for kids, but not that. So it was really impactful to me. And I'm so glad she started that. It's such a fantastic conference to get to go to. So she's the faculty member that really made an impact.
That sounds like she had a great impact on your career even, right? I mean, you talked about
Yeah.
attending the conference and making those connections. That's wonderful. And it's important to feel supported in your department. And so it's glad that I'm happy that she was able to create that environment for you. And you mentioned that's where you got your position. So tell us, what do you do, where you work, and what is it that you do at GoDaddy?
Sure. So I'll start. A lot of people ask me what GoDaddy is, what we do. We started as a domain registrar. So you want a website, you got to buy a domain name. You come to GoDaddy to do that. And that's where we were a couple decades ago. Now we've moved into being, I think we call ourselves like empowering everyday entrepreneurs. So we're an entire suite of tools that support small businesses. And then people say, but it's still called GoDaddy? Haven't you seen those commercials from the Super Bowl? And I go, yes, I have. I'm well aware. And I've been involved in a lot of discussions around this because, as you can imagine, we have women groups here and we, get to talk and network. And why is it still called GoDaddy? Well, GoDaddy made quite a name for itself. It's very, very well known. So that's not something we're willing to give up. However, I always like to tell people you have to look at the actions, not just the words. And GoDaddy has really proven that. GoDaddy has, I think they just posted, this is the 9th year in a row they've reached pay parity for men and women across the world and pay parity for minorities here in the US. So they have put a huge effort into becoming incredibly inclusive and allowing that diversity to improve our products. So I think GoDaddy is a great company. What I do is I'm a software development engineer. I'm a level 3 now. So they call me senior. I'll take it, but I still think I'm mid-level. There's always more to learn. I do all back end. So I don't do any front end, which is kind of, maybe some people don't realize that's an option. I didn't quite realize that when I was job searching, that purely back end was an option. A lot of things now are web development because so much is on the web. I feel like I got lucky because I don't love front end. So I work on our email products. When you want an email, so my name @domain.com, you want that email address. I work on a team that, my first team, we migrated emails. So we moved all your email content from one place generally outside of GoDaddy into GoDaddy. So that would help us draw in customers where we say, okay, well, you have your email here and your domain here and your website here. Well, we can move all of that. So it's all in one place with us here at GoDaddy. We also use that tool to do a forced migration. We were doing an end of life on our internal product. So we migrated something like 5 million email addresses. That's 5 million mailboxes, all that data, the contacts, the calendars. So we moved all of that into our Office 365 product. I'm now working on a team that we call provision, that creates the mailbox. So when you go into GoDaddy, so much happens behind the scenes. First, you put something in your cart, goes to your cart, and then you click checkout. Once you check out, all this stuff has to happen that basically says, okay, now you can make a mailbox because you paid us. And once we get that information, it goes through my team's system to make that mailbox real. It sounds simple because, when you go into Gmail and you want to create a new account, it just pops up right there. But when you're using a custom domain, especially on Microsoft Office, there's a lot more that goes into it. So that's what I'm working on now. We're doing a rewrite of our legacy system. So I get to start from scratch and we get to right the wrongs that were made, 15 years ago. So that's what I do at GoDaddy.
It sounds like there's a lot of teamwork involved because you mentioned having a team and so on. And it sounds like it's a perfect fit for what you're interested in, which is wonderful. Now, there are going to be some students who are watching your Alumni Spotlight who may be thinking, well, I want to work on backend. I want to be a software development engineer. I want to work for GoDaddy. What advice would you give that student who is thinking about pursuing a career like yours?
Sure. So the first thing to remember, you kind of touched on it a little bit, is in school, at least for me, there were very few group projects. Everything was very individual. And that's really not what industry is like. Everything we do is team-based. You won't do anything with at least one or two other people being involved, if not your whole team. And this requires a lot of soft skills. There's a lot of stereotypes about those of us who major in computer science. And they're just that, they're just stereotypes. So, I see a lot of on forums and stuff of people like grinding leak code. All they focus on is leak code, but they still can't get interviews or they can't get the job. But you have to remember, sometimes I spend more time talking to my coworkers than I do my wife, right? We spend hours on Zoom sometimes and discussing and solving problems together. So having the soft skills to have the patience for that, which took me a while, but also, can you explain your thoughts in a cohesive manner that others can understand? What we do is very complex and it takes a lot to understand. And once you understand it, it's even harder sometimes to put it back out there and ask the questions in a manner that other people understand. So, when you're doing those coding interviews, think out loud, practice thinking out loud, because it's not just the interview where you do that. That's going to be your day-to-day job. Is I'm thinking this, I'm writing this because of this. What do you think? What else could we do? And that's a huge part of the job that I feel like even when I was in college, I kind of didn't know was there. I always kind of knew, yeah, you're on a team because you have to have more than one person to handle some of these large products. But just how much of it you do together kind of surprised me. So that's one. The second one is to remember the core of what we do is problem solving, right? We're solving problems. The reason we're hired, the reason what we're doing is because it's not already out there. There's not a solution, which is also kind of an interesting concept coming from school because you're doing an assignment that many other people sitting right around you are doing the same thing. And sometimes hundreds of students before you, years before you have done it. So it's clearly already been solved. But when you're in industry, you're solving things that haven't been solved before, at least not the very specific way you need it. So remembering it's not necessarily about how many languages you can put on your resume. It's not about how many frameworks or tools, or it's not about listing all that. It's about demonstrating that you can solve problems. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. Yes, coding interviews is one, but side projects, contributing to open source, doing internships. You need to remember learning a new language. I joined when I joined this team, we decided to switch from C#, which is similar to Java, which U of A taught while I was there, to Go, which is kind of, I call it's like C, but like extra fancy. There's extra stuff. They're very different, but switching languages was not the difficult part of this team. It's solving the problems. So if you can speak to that, that's going to help you, get into industry. And remembering how you can solve the problems, you use these tools, languages, frameworks, AWS, they're all just tools you use to create that solution. So I always try to tell people who are interviewing, looking for internships, if you can try to show that through conversation, through coding interviews, through experience, you're going to come off as a very well-rounded candidate.
That's great. That's great advice for anybody looking to go into industry. What advice would you give a student who's thinking about going to the U of A or even already at the U of A in terms of being successful, enjoying the experience, all that? What advice would you give them?
Get involved. College is a unique time because it's so easy to get involved. There's so many opportunities and they're right there. You're probably already in Gould Simpson for something or another. Stop by the tutor room, go to office hours, attend the Wix meeting. Getting involved, because the stronger and bigger you build your network, the more opportunities can be available. You never really know, when you meet someone, when they may pop up again. When you're in the same industry, you don't know where they're going to end up. They might give you a referral or they might have really great advice. In terms of, coming to U of A, it's kind of similar, but as I mentioned, I was terrified because it felt huge to me. And something that helped me was living on campus. I know not all have the luxury to afford living on campus, but I was also terrified. My mom told me I couldn't go to U of A if I didn't live on campus. I was like, but I have to share a room. It's a community bathroom. That just sounds awful. Why are you making me do this? Just get me an apartment. And as I mentioned before, I became a resident assistant and lived voluntarily on campus for 2 more years. You learn a lot when you live on campus, especially if you're just from high school. If you're 18, this is the first time living away from your parents. Living on campus can really help jumpstart that community for you, because you're in a hallway with 30 other people who are in the same position as you. And so whether you find a community in computer science or outside of it, that's really going to help just your success at school in general. The other big thing is take advantage of the career fairs. Even if you think you're not experienced enough, because I'll tell you, I met a hiring manager when I was a sophomore. And he told me, we only hire new grads or people going into their senior year. That's all we hire. I said, okay, well, I'll be back next year. I went back next year. He remembered me and I convinced him to give me an internship, even though I was only going into my junior year. These connections matter. You read online, well, I applied to this LinkedIn job, but it already has thousands of applications. It's happening right now. But if you get in front of a recruiter, an engineer, a hiring manager, and you get to have a face-to-face conversation, you are much, much more likely to get an offer from them, or they'll remember you next year, right? If you just hand them a resume and walk away, they're not going to remember that. Career fairs aren't a thing once you graduate. There's career services and there's alumni networks, sure. But there's nothing like being in that sweaty ballroom when it's 100 degrees out in August, being face to face with these people. I know it sounds like a pain. I know, because I dragged myself over there every year, but it can make incredibly lasting connections. So take advantage of those while you're on campus.
That's great advice. And I think it ties in nicely with what you were talking about, developing those soft skills, practicing those soft skills, implementing those soft skills, and the importance of networking. So it's critical. Is there anything else you want to share with folks watching your spotlight about your time here, after your time here?
You
Maybe
know,
give us a little preview of what you're going to be talking about at convocation, since you're our first convocation speaker for the department.
computer science is hard. And just because it's hard to you, or you feel like you're struggling, doesn't mean you won't be successful, right? If you reach out and you use that network, you use those resources, you can do it. And something, I love this analogy that my dad told me back when I was starting, because as a kid, I always asked him, why are we doing this? What's this mean? What's happening? And he told me that when you start computer science, you're a freshman and you know nothing aside that maybe you know Python's a language. It feels incredibly magical. Things just kind of work. You do things like your professor says. And as you progress through your degree, it becomes less and less magical and more logical. And I remember sitting in my OS course. That was one of my favorite classes I took because it basically solved the rest of the magic. It's like, that's how the computer does it. That's how I can have 9 different windows open at once. And so if you're feeling like overwhelmed with what you have to learn, it's okay. That's why it's a 4-year degree. That's why it's a hard thing to do, is it takes time. And I believe this wholeheartedly when I was a freshman. I was like, it's okay. My dad said it's okay. And I started my job and I was like going to my manager. I'm like antsy. It's like, but I want to know how it works. I want to be able to do. He's like, it just takes time. It'll come with time. I was like, no, I want to learn what all 45 of these database tables do right now. He's like, no, Morgan, it just takes time. It's okay. And I was so antsy. I was so frustrated. And about 6 to 8 months into my job, it dawned on me. It's like, wow, I do actually know what most of them do now. So, while a lot of computer science students are very ambitious, very eager to take it on, solve those problems, sometimes things take time. So that's something to keep in mind. Staying up late, feel like you don't understand, it comes with time. In terms of convocation, I remember when I was graduating, I've been thinking about it, and it kind of dawned on me that when you're in elementary school, middle school, and high school, I'm sure everyone had a teacher said, "Oh, well, that's not going to work when you're in middle school. Your high school teachers are never going to allow this to happen. You'll never get away with this in college." Right? You had all these things, and to some extent they were right and sometimes they were wrong, but regardless, they were basically very explicitly preparing you for the next step. And in college, or I mean in high school, your parents were probably slowly giving you more independence. You learned to drive and maybe you're allowed to do this, and it felt very structured and very guided. And college graduation came, I'm like, oh man, what now? I have to go be a full adult, and it can feel very scary and it can feel very unknown, but also incredibly exciting at the same time, because to some extent, this is what you've been working towards, probably not just for 4 years, maybe 8 years or 12 years, right? As you're working through, you do well in elementary to do well in middle school. And they claim that if you don't get good grades in middle school, then, well, nothing's going to happen for you. At least my teachers kind of scared me. So graduation can feel very exciting, but also this almost impending doom at the same time. So I'll be talking a bit more about that because it can feel somewhat lonely and scary and exciting, and there's so many emotions behind it. But I guarantee you're going to be okay. It'll work out. Things will happen. And my mom always says nothing is forever except having a kid. So if it's not the right job, if it's not the right city, if it's not the right apartment, it'll be okay.
Oh, that sounds really great. I'm looking forward to hearing your convocation speech on May 9th. So, well, thank you again, Morgan, for agreeing to do this alumni spotlight. Provide a lot of wonderful stories about your experience. You shared some great memories and some wonderful advice that I think will benefit those that are watching this spotlight. Thank you again.
Of course.